Hello folks, this is Nigel at Spiritual Awareness New Zealand and just organising things here. Oh damn, okay. Well, I can shift that around. I'm just getting this started so that I can talk to you without being interrupted. Okay. Now, it's Wednesday night, 9 p.m. What is it? The 26th of 26th of October, and on the 23rd of October we had this come in from Graham Carter, who is the editor of Fishing, what's it called? Fishing and Outdoors. And he says, I'll read it out actually. He says, letter to the Prime Minister and leaders of each political party below. So he's written a letter to the Prime Minister and leaders of each political party. And he says, the anti-1080 movement is about to be quashed. Some of you may think I'm nuts, as the government is about to do with us, as they did with Jamie Lee Ross. I have information that he was drugged, hence his incarceration, because of the information that he has, which they are seriously concerned about. Is this an orchestrated attempt to shut him down? The top echelons in government are very seriously corrupt. Now, before I read the letter out, I'll just make a side note of my own, which is that, when it comes to politicians, and most people have read my opinions on it, a whole lot of them are quite nuts. So, however, when they use psychiatry as a political weapon to silence somebody, that's another thing again. So he writes, 23 October 2018, Dear Sir, Madam, is it true that the Crown, through the New Zealand Police and GCSB, who have had these people under surveillance, are contemplating using the Terrorism Suppression Act 2002 to arrest any person or persons related to or involved with the anti-1080 movement leadership? I have confirmed information to the effect that the planning is underway, and these people are likely to be incarcerated for up to 2 years without any rights of legal assistance. They will simply disappear. Is it also true that the makeup of 1080 has been altered and that strength of 1080 has been increased because the possums have become immune to the standard 1080 pellet using secret ingredients, which has made the new 1080 pellets 100 times more lethal, and that the residue remains in the soil for up to 50 years. Our understanding is that this is being driven by the National Party, the Green Party, and the senior management of the Department of Conservation, who have incredible power through their global corporate backers. Our Prime Minister is aware of this, and she says she is powerless to intervene and that she is outvoted. Graham Carter, editor. Now, this is a national publication, so when an editor comes out and writes a letter like that to the Prime Minister and MPs and leaders of each political party, he says, that's pretty serious, So obviously, this Jamie Lee Ross thing is, probably is a big thing that's happened. Now, one thing that has come up in the last day or two, was pointed out by someone, and I won't say their name because I haven't had their approval to mention their name. However, And I don't know the truth of this either. But let me just change screens here so I can find something. Here we go. Okay, cool. Okay, you've all heard about New Zealand emissions trading scheme. And here's a little bit about it. The New Zealand emissions trading scheme is a partial coverage, all free allocation. Actually, I won't even read it because honestly, there are a lot of words in there that you just wouldn't understand, or a lot of people won't. I don't understand all of it. It's a very strange law, but essentially, or agreement, or whatever you want to call it. But this is very much to do with the Kyoto Treaty. And you've probably heard mention of the Kyoto Treaty on the news. And again, because they, how do you say, confuse with terminology and so forth, they can hide a hell of a lot right under your nose without realizing that something's going on. And so I'll tie all this together in a moment when I get to it, but because I think this is worth discussing. But the Kyoto Protocol is an international treaty which extends the 1992 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. You all have heard of that. That commits state parties to reduce greenhouse gas emissions based on the scientific consensus that global warming is occurring. Notice they say the scientific consensus that global warming is occurring. That's part one. And part two, it is extremely likely that human-made CO2 emissions have predominantly caused it. So they say based on scientific consensus. So it's not scientific fact, it's just consensus. In other words, enough people agree that this global warming is happening, even though there isn't a hell of a lot of evidence of it. Now, true, there is climate change happening. There are things happening in the environment. Most of that is actually man-made, as we have documented well and truly on Weather Wars International Facebook page. Rick does an incredible job. He's just back there. He arrived back on Monday. And so he's running the page and he's pumping out the articles, which is just what he's so damn good at doing. So yeah, you can read about or listen or whatever about man-made weather and earthquakes and so forth on there. And I think there's, to be honest, I think there's a bit of both happening. There is man-made and there is also extreme weather happening, and there are a lot of factors going into all of this. There's the magnetic pole flip that's slowly sort of happening more and more, where the magnetic poles are actually flipping. And I guess there's going to be a point where those poles get to an actual flip point. They're actually moved quite a bit off the North and South Pole already, and when they get to a certain point, they will snap into place, just like when you have a couple of magnets and you flip the polarity on it and it flips around real quick. Well, I think we're close to that happening. And sure, the planet won't flip like that. The poles will, but what it will cause in terms of weather for the planet would be, you can only guess. We're probably looking at tidal, tsunamis, huge tsunamis, and a lot of damage. So I don't know. That's another whole subject. Getting back to this Kyoto Protocol, one of the things about this carbon emissions trading scheme and so forth, it's a trading scheme. In other words, it's a a tool that has been used to trade between countries. And obviously countries don't get interested in this kind of thing unless there's money to be made in it. And generally when you look at anything that is a little bit suspect, you follow the money and you'll usually hit the bullseye. And I think that we're actually looking at something that's definitely a possible bullseye, that's for sure. And here I'll lay it out, and that is that the 1080 is, and this is, there are different motivations, and I have heard different reasons as to why 1080 is being dropped. And I'm not talking about to get rid of possums and rats. One is to keep people out of the bush so they can't, go bush, if you like, to destroy, to wipe out the birds and so forth. But here's what I'm talking about, and this is what was suggested to me, and I thank the person who passed this information on, because I do think it's worth at least looking. I've got a fire going in the background. It's a little bit cold tonight, thought it'd be kind of cozy. Getting back to this, so 1080, the assertion is that 1080 is being used to get rid of the pests and protocol, and that was my dog taking a deep breath, not me, if you heard it, to get rid of the pests and predators that could endanger trees, if you like. And you remember when Labor was going for the election and so forth, and the promise was to plant 1 billion trees in New Zealand. This was the new thing, and to get the forestry industry back up and running much, much bigger. And so somehow or another, it is asserted that possibly this 1080 is intimately connected to the carbon trading scheme. In other words, to knock out the pests that would stop those trees being destroyed, at least temporarily. And so there's a lot of money to be made in it. Now, I really don't know how that trading scheme works a hell of a lot. It's too much reading for me. I'm basically somebody who likes to open the door to things and let other people do the homework. In some ways, like I'll study up on stuff, but I'm mostly let's say a starter, if you like. I like starting things. So in respect to this, we have the this idea that the 1080 is being dropped to somehow, basically to protect the trees and so forth, because New Zealand stands to make a lot of money from the trees. Well, I don't know how true that is, but maybe some of you can kind of get onto it and start looking at how much money is involved with this trading scheme and so forth. But one thing is very, very clear, is that this is the United Nations convention, this Kyoto Protocol, this carbon trading scheme is a United Nations thing. Jacinda Ardern, our Prime Minister, is a big New World Order and United Nations advocate. And she is totally up there with wanting a new world government. One world government, or governments all working together, or however you want to put it. And so she is pushing United Nations agenda. And to back that up, this whole plastic bag campaign is another United Nations initiative. And she never mentioned that it was a United Nations initiative when she announced the plan to ban plastic bags. She said that she got letters from kids saying that they wanted it done. Bullshit. Excuse my language, but that is not why. The truth is that she is impressing people at United Nations, and you know it. And if you look at the United Nations pages on the plastic bag initiative, it's right there. They want it banned right through the world. And New Zealand is not the first country to actually start in this direction. So, yes, Jacinda is very much supporting United Nations. And so I would not, you know, there are connections here in this Kyoto Protocol and the carbon trading scheme and so forth is part of that agenda, that United Nations agenda. And another thing I was going to say is that she's constantly mentioning sustainability. So, you know, just another indicator. That is pretty much what I wanted to go over. And I haven't heard where this Jamie Lee Ross thing is up to, whether he's been released or whether anyone's managed to get any information out of him. What I would like to see happen is, you know, if he does have information, somebody needs to talk to him, get the information out of him and publish it on alternative media, like on Facebook, on alternative blog sites and so forth, get it out into the public domain before he gets knocked off, and so that he won't get knocked off, because as soon as it's out there, then you know, we can all move on and go from that moment. So I would like to see that happen. I don't know how. I don't know this guy, and you know, so on. And as I say, I haven't heard where this whole thing is up to. But I hope that it all works out that way. One thing I could say though is that this move to put him into the you know, psych hands is a big mistake on their part, because they're shooting themselves in the foot. They are hurting their own cause. Because so many people were against this. For so many different reasons, and you know, the principal one being that it's wrong, and common sense tells us that. And there are plenty of people who have plenty of stories of bad situations that have happened to do with that whole area of government mismanagement, if you like. So that's all I have to say for the moment. And now I have to find there we go, my meeting page, so I can actually end this thing. Cool. Okay, well, I will continue to keep posting and so forth, and wishing you all the best till my next update. This is Nigel at Spiritual Awareness New Zealand, checking out.